Wonderful. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for bearing with us and our partners and friends at OEB to making this live stream happen. I will be handing over to Sandra, and I look forward to delving a little bit deeper into the future of workforce with everyone today.
Thank you so much. Welcome, welcome. And thank you so much for joining our session here today. I'm Sandra Collin and work as an enterprise account executive with Coursera here in the DACH region. And I'm super excited to joining you from London this afternoon for our webinar on building a future-proof workforce, linking learning to business outcomes. We will actually run 3 polls during this webinar to sense check a little bit on what is meaningful to you, and we'll all see the results out of these immediately. I highly encourage you also to send some questions in the chat to keep it a little bit lively, and either address these during the presentation or I will address these towards the end in our Q&A when we have a little bit more time for it. And for visibility as well, I would encourage you to put in your name and title and the organization you work for when you ask the questions. Okay, I think we're all excited and of what is happening in the industry and to spend the next 45 minutes with you. And I'm delighted to introduce you to our regional manager for EMEA, Valerie Focke. Valerie, over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and a very warm welcome to everyone. And thank you for the very kind introduction, Sandra. My name is Valerie Focke. I am a regional director here at Coursera, looking after our 4 business. We have a little bit of background noise. I'm sure that will be resolved in just a moment. And thank you again for everyone's diligence in sticking with this session. I know quite a few of you are also joining us from different parts of the globe. I suspect there's also some people that have gotten up slightly early to hear more about the future of the workforce, delving into the link between retention, learning, and business outcomes today. But as Sandra has already pointed out, whilst we have a little less time than we would have liked today, one of the things that we really want to get is a view of what's moving you and your organization and within your personal function relative to these topics. So we're going to actually start off today with a little bit of a poll. So the poll question that we have, and this is one of the things that we are going to be covering as we continue through the presentation today, is what do you see as the biggest challenge for L&D leaders as you move into 2022 planning? Is it budget access? So is the access to supporting financially initiatives to help up and reskilling a key feature of discussion that you find most difficult? Is the fast changing skill requirements something that is keeping you from executing as you would like to on some of the business outcomes? And to that point, is getting the buy-in within your business, ensuring that everyone is singing off the same hymn sheet, really something that is providing you with a challenge. And last but not least, I think this is something that we, of course, hear about quite a lot, the demonstration of the return of investment. So if I'm thinking about providing additional resources to help my employees upskill, what can I expect to see out of it? Or is there something that we haven't captured here? Please share your insights, share what is something that you feel is one of the biggest challenges. And I'm looking forward to looking at your results shortly. Sandra, I'm keen to hear from your conversations with customers, in particular in the DACH region. Which one of you are you going to suspect is our top runner for today?
That's a very good question, Valerie. I think out of these, when looking at them, I think there is a real necessity for the fast changing skills requirements, as these are really changing at the moment massively. And we see, I see a lot in my conversations with clients that clients have difficulties to find the right skills, to address the right skills, to link them to the business outcomes, and to really plan and create the right program.
Wonderful.
What are your views on that? So do we have the result of the poll yet?
So we're actually getting the answers in the chat.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so I'm seeing so at the moment, B is winning. So Sandra, I think you might have called it quite well, that certainly, yes, more B. So the skills requirements are changing, and certainly this is quite convenient that you mentioned this. We are going to be talking quite a lot about this, but very quickly also we have D catching up. So ability to demonstrate ROI is certainly also a key topic. We have one of our participants, we highlight the alignment with business is one of the key challenges that they're facing. So this is very consistent with some of the conversations certainly that I've been involved in, and it's great to see that B, which is also some of the topic in our presentation today, is really one of the key focus areas that you're looking at for FY22. Right, wonderful. Please keep your answers coming. If you have an opinion on what the key challenge is for L&D leaders into the next year, so 2022, as you go into those planning rounds, as you're starting to think about budgets, as you're having those internal conversations, what really is driving you. As I mentioned, currently the picture seems to show by a very narrow margin the fast changing skills requirement is the biggest challenge for our participants today. With that in mind, one of the things we want to do first is, as the future is always informed by the past, let's first of all take a little bit of a step back and think about the world as we have it today. So we're all familiar that there has been some significant change. What we see today is facilitated by an unprecedented, as Antonio Guterres calls it, human tragedy in the form of the COVID-19 pandemic. But with this and looking at it with a mindset of opportunity, he also mentions it as an opportunity to build back a more equal and sustainable world. This is a topic that a lot of organizations in the public sphere, such as the United Nations, but also the World Economic Forum, have taken more time to dive into. And I'm hoping that you're following this very closely, as I feel this is a very interesting and rapidly evolving topic that is really driving change. And one of the key change drivers, of course, is technology. And today we will be covering a lot more in depth as to what those technological changes are facilitating. But one of the areas that they're affecting is both education and the world of work. So we will dive into these in greater detail, but as we know, the economic shutdown facilitated through lockdowns in various countries and other measures to stem the course of COVID-19 has created a seismic impact on workers. It has meant, on the one hand, a rise in unemployment, but also job displacement. And again, we'll cover both of these points in greater detail. To give you a sense of the scale of this change, 8.8% of all working hours were lost in 2022. That is equivalent to 225 million full-time employment positions. Now, what this effectively means is that as the world reopens, as we start to learn to live with COVID-19, there are some measures that are being counteracted for sure, but these are long-term changes that have affected over 80% of the global workforce, whether that is due to their workplace closing altogether, or indeed through the change of their roles. And it has been 4 times the impact of the financial crisis, which for many of us doesn't feel that long ago either. Now, that being said, let's take a little bit of a look at some of the other changes that this has facilitated. And one of them, I think most of you, if not all of you, are entirely familiar with. The Great Lockdown, as we refer to it, has accelerated digitization. What does this mean, in effect, that I'm sitting here in my home office and speaking to you via Zoom or another tool, whichever you choose to use within your organization, and business has continued in this digitized fashion. So our way of interacting with others has moved into this digital and online landscape. As you can see here, actually, this has sharply affected the digital job capacity, and we anticipate to continue to see this grow. In this particular study from Microsoft, certainly the greatest area of opportunity and growth, this 98 million new jobs created in the next 4 years centers around software engineering and software development. And why is this? Well, as our lives move more and more into the digital sphere, certainly enabling that digital life or world of work certainly has meant that we need people to create it. We need people to be able to facilitate it. We're using the cloud as a vehicle to provide this. So as an opportunity for you to access content anywhere without any boundaries, jobs in the cloud area in particular have risen. And subsequently, of course, as our lives become more digital, the role of data has become increasingly important, as well as keeping that data safe. So to your last 2 points here, cybersecurity and privacy and trust certainly form the backbone of many conversations that we have here at Coursera, as well as for most of the organizations we work with. What does this mean for organizations? So as we look at the jobs that this creates, the business landscape requires companies to adapt and pivot. Now, this unprecedented change means that people are being forced to adapt to it. As I mentioned earlier on, the way that we're working together is less office-based than perhaps it has been previously. So we're learning to use new tools to get those jobs done. Now, 54% of workers needed upskilling pre-pandemic. So even before all of this happened, 40% of tasks that we were doing on a day-to-day basis were actually vulnerable to automation, things that could be more efficient if they weren't done by us, where we have greater productivity outputs elsewhere. However, 85% of jobs that will exist in 2030 have not even been invented yet. So thinking about the scale and looking here to some of the findings that McKinsey and the World Economic Forum have shared with us, growing demand for emerging skills also entail that you have to keep thinking about what can I do to keep my employability, to keep my employees' employability really top of mind, to keep a pace with this technological change. With this in mind, do people recognize this? So we think
Valerie, I'm sorry, I'm just quickly interrupting because we have a question here from somebody out of the forum. And I think you have to go back to the slide number 7. And the question here was, what do you mean by job capacity? New jobs that will be created, or what is exactly meant by that?
Yes, absolutely. So in this particular study, it's looking at jobs that are set to be created afresh. So if you are to think about individuals who currently go into the world of work, people will have certain functional jobs, but these are likely perhaps to remain linear, but a whole new category of job might be instantiated. So by way of example, and I give one example that is perhaps relatively easy to identify with, for instance, the role of digital in regards to marketing. So we used to think about marketing as something that you found perhaps on billboards or in newspapers and magazines. And with the rise of the internet, certainly we're seeing opportunities to lift that whole capability into a digital world and interact with people differently, and also get much more of a sense check as to what is working relative to your marketing inputs and outputs through the use of data. Now, that being said, that's a very minor example, and what's actually meant here is much more about jobs we don't even know about yet. But along that vein, I hope that makes it slightly clearer. And thank you, Sandra, for that question. Now, as I mentioned, it certainly is apparent to quite a lot of our organizations that they are thinking about upskilling and reskilling. But really, is this also a business priority? Is your CEO currently aware of how acute this problem is? There's not enough for us as leaders in this space to talk about this, but is this a recognized investment area? And thankfully, the poll suggests, and this is taken from partners at PwC, that CEOs favor upskilling over hiring new employees and understand predominantly that they can create greater innovation and accelerate their digital journeys through upskilling and reskilling. And certainly this is true in most of the organizations that we speak with. They're really trying to drive not only greater productivity around digital transformation initiatives that they have, and with that greater business growth, but they also understand that they can also improve their brand as well as keep people within their business if they help them to continue to develop and grow. Now, the future of work, as we mentioned, requires for you to be mindful of some of the job capacities and skills that will come up. We talked a little bit about how the way that we work together since the pandemic has changed. And with that, it requires a more agile learning style. When we talk about employees, we used to think about those that have a disciplinary approach, meaning that we call this the I-shaped knowledge. So you'll see here that this is, I have a certain set of knowledge in one particular area, and that's really where my expertise is. I'm a subject matter expert. On the flip side, we are now talking more about T-shaped people. What is a T-shaped person? They have an expertise, certainly into one subject area, but they will also have multidisciplinary skills. So again, here we're really starting to think outside of the traditional functional area that you operate in. And the direction of travel that we're seeing in terms of the future of learning and the future of work is to develop these X-shaped capabilities, where you're bringing in expertise across an organization, as you see here, where the disciplines will converge, meaning that you will have cross-disciplinary teams. And a lot of the conversations we have here is from organizations implementing agile methodologies, thinking about themselves in terms of tribes and squads, and really trying to break open those traditional silos and work unilaterally across the team. Now, that being said, this type of approach obviously means that there are different skills that now are in demand. So with this in mind, one of the top skill areas that we're seeing certainly is the rise for demand in active thinking and active learning, complex problem solving. And as you notice, as you read down this list, a lot of them aren't actually technology related. And so we'll go into this in a little bit more detail as we go through the presentation, but I do want to just make note that that is the case, because a lot of what we hear in the media today is that digital skills matter. I need to learn how to code. I need to not be frightened of AI and robots, etc., but really that there is a dearth of these skills that are currently in demand. And whilst the future of jobs report from the World Economic Forum underlines this point, it certainly is true. The top 20 job roles in increasing demand across industries do happen to be related to technology. But what we're seeing is that the human skills that wrap around this are actually growing in greater importance. So as we start to think about what can we automate, then what is the role of the human? Certainly that we're starting to see a much clearer picture of the skills that are cross-functional, cross-divisional, and cross-disciplinary that are currently resonating. So again, here you see a lot of emphasis on critical thinking and analysis and problem solving. I had a customer conversation with one of my colleagues earlier on today, and we really started to think about self-management and working with people. So certainly I can echo this just even from speaking to some of our customers today, that is true. And now with that, obviously, I'm curious to hear your opinion. But first of all, I wanted to shed a little bit of light as to, we shared some insights from other organizations, but Coursera here today, and for those of you who perhaps know us a little bit less, I'm sure we'll get a chance to recap as to our approach on this. One of the outputs, however, that we have recently released, in fact, this week, and I encourage you to take a look at it, is our industry skills report. This is an annual publication that we put out, which really looks again across the learning landscape. And I see here my colleague has been so kind as to post the link onto the chat, so feel free to download that and take a look as I'm speaking. It underlines the seismic shift I was speaking about earlier in terms of the consumer behavior around and creation of new digital habits. Organizations are rethinking the way they deliver services to their customers in and external. So if you're thinking about your employees as your internal customer, certainly how you keep them happy and engaged within their workforce. We're seeing a sharp increase in tech investments in order to keep pace for this. So whether these are tools in order to help you collaborate, as one we're using today, or whether it's a case of you're digitizing a way for you to interact with your customers, or even how you can better get output from your customers as they're procuring services through your website or similar transactions that you might have. Whether you're a financial institution and you have to digitize your KYC process, lots of opportunity to invest in digitizing processes and investing in technology to do so. And of course, we see that a lot of organizations are undergoing this transformation at an accelerated pace. 87% of our respondents actually acknowledged that this was a moderate or severe transformation, and only 44% actually felt themselves prepared. So keen to hear a little bit more from the group as we go through. But one of the things that we heard, certainly, of all the displaced job hours, you may remember 225 million full-time employees lost their positions or the equivalent thereof in 2020. And I had already alluded to these changes being more permanent in nature. What you may have heard from within your own organizations, the new world of work, the way we're interacting with one another now has had implications on our happiness, on our workforce's happiness, on our self-esteem, on the way we interact with our families. And what I mean by this is there has been a really sharp increase in burnout due to the lack of boundaries between your work life and your home life. And as we start to think about reopening offices and so forth, I'm sure, again, this is a very interesting area to continue to observe. But certainly, I also encourage you to think about how this looks in your organization. With that being said, we're also seeing a big increase in organizations and employees being open to retraining. And so as we start to think about this more, what is the impact of reskilling within your organization and on things like burnout? So we looked at earlier about how organizations are looking to learning to help keep people within their business. So talent acquisition and retention was one of those goals that CEOs saw as critical. But with that in mind, how does that actually impact your company performance? And actually looking at encouraging learning within your organization has clear outputs relative to stock performance. So the correlation here being the more you as an organization encourage your employees to learn and build those new skills, the more likely your company is to perform better. Now, with that in mind, investing in skills, and to the point earlier on, the skills requirements, our pollsters said, is changing very quickly. How do I know I'm investing in the right thing? How much is the right amount to invest? And then how do I continue to showcase ROI within my organization and work with my business peers to do so? Companies are continuing to invest in this particular area, and we see a big shift towards them thinking about skills acquisition and also measuring those skills and thinking about how we can look at demonstrating things like internal mobility, engagement, and productivity. One of the things that we take in particular heed to is understanding what is the outcome for our learners at the end of it. And so with this in mind, investing in learning, there should be a certain amount of benefits that any learner can report so that they feel better prepared for future jobs, meaning that even within the own organization, they have an opportunity to think about stretching themselves in terms of their capabilities and perhaps do an internal move or even externally look to provide confidence towards a new role. It also seeks to improve confidence at work. The more skilled I feel relative to the tasks that have been given me, the more confident I am and more engaged I am in the workplace. They feel better equipped at their current job, and they are applying that learning within the context of their position. Now, we look at this through the lens of threefold topics. So I mentioned earlier on, in the digital era, we really start to think about digital skills. And a lot of time people think, digital skills, that's technology. But it isn't just limited to technology. And as we saw in that graph earlier, actually the #1 skill that is currently in demand, according to the World Economic Forum, actually is in the realm of data science. Now here, this doesn't displace, and so our data tells us that any individual within an organization will require business skills, i.e. those skills related to the function that they're in. So if I'm in finance, the skills relating to my finance job. If I'm in technology in finance, I will still need to use things like certain tools in order to do my job. And last but not least, I'll need data or data science to be able to analyze my performance. So here are some of the skills that we're currently seeing on the platform that are rising in demand. Now, it's time for another poll. I feel I've spoken quite a lot, so I'm keen to hear a little bit of feedback from the group. What is your biggest challenge in reskilling and upskilling your employees in the current climate? So is it the lack of internal mobility due to skills shortages? So are you unable to move talent internally at the moment? Losing skills to your competitors? Are people leaving to join other companies within your industry? Or are you losing people to different industries? Keeping pace versus fast changing skills requirements. So again, thinking of our earlier poll, how are you keeping abreast of some of the changes and demands from the business around the skills that they need? Or is it E and another? So please put your answers in chat as before. And again, an early winner is D. So please keep providing your answer. Great to see, again, keeping pace with the changing skill requirements seems to be one of the key challenges. Sandra, do you want to maybe talk about some of this from your own direct experience?
I just wanted to jump in here because, that reflects a little bit the point we had in the first poll, keeping pace versus changing skills requirements. But what I feel is really important for organizations to address nowadays is the lack of internal mobility due to skills shortages. Because we know the average shelf life of a skill is under 2 years. We see that organizations cannot keep up so easily with this, but there is a need to fill certain roles, especially in the area of digital. And therefore, there is a requirement to have internal mobility because there's simply not enough talent in the market. And therefore, I think point A is important too. And that's what I'm seeing in the market.
Wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. So again, I think we have a runaway winner though. So keeping pace with the fast changing skills requirement is point #1. It is the most difficult thing. And luckily we have some slides to just this point, which is very handy. So one of the things we wanted to think about together with you today is how do you align jobs to skills to content? So the jobs that you need now and in the future, and perhaps some of you are performing workforce planning exercises as we speak, which are looking to uncover what skills do I have today and what skills do I need for the future? And then really, what do I need to provide to get those skills? So content in this very broad sense is what do I need to provide in order to build those skills of the future? So that being said, companies that are upskilling for dynamic roles, and when I say dynamic roles, it's exactly this concept. So you heard me say earlier, we've lived in a world where we're all these I-shaped people. We're subject matter experts. I'm a marketeer, I'm a market expert. If I'm a salesperson, I'm a sales expert, and that's my emphasis. As we move into this T and X-shaped world, these are dynamic roles where the needs and requirements of your role will change over time. You're being pulled into cross-functional projects and your internal mobility is also increasing. And how do I get there? How do I build this? And very practically, we see there are 4 challenges associated with this, and we'll tackle them one by one in as much as we have the time today. But one of the key challenges we see here at Coursera is difficulty of getting one clear plan for skills transformation. And this alludes to what we spoke about earlier when we talked about getting alignment with your business stakeholders and getting them to really articulate what it is that they need. And then, of course, obviously, the pace at which they need it. Now, that being said, once you have decided what are the skills that you need in order to drive your agenda and drive those business outcomes, how do you then select what you need relative to create those skills within your organization? And again, here I refer to content, but a lot of you will have been in that exact situation. You will have sat down to look at what are the different ways that I can upskill someone. Am I going to invite trainers to do it? Am I going to buy relative skill libraries? And then which libraries do I buy? What is the skill? What is the format that is going to help me drive that skills acquisition? And then last but not least, you can put as much content or skill pathways out there. But if your learners aren't actually engaging with your content and do not understand the need to invest in this, then it's incredibly difficult to achieve the business change that you're looking to drive. So the learner engagement, and particularly as we now see this accelerated pace of change, it's really trying to create that. And one of the most common discussion points we've had most recently is that culture of learning. Organizations really trying to drive that culture of learning. Is then once you have these bits in place, you know what skills you need to build, and you have a plan that's dynamic, that will allow for people to have greater internal mobility opportunities, that will be able to deliver across different initiatives within your organization. You have the right content to build those skills, and your audience is well motivated and engaged. But last but not least, you need to really understand what outcomes are we driving. We talked earlier about ROI and success of any program that you engage with, and this is a hugely difficult one for a lot of the organizations I've had the pleasure to speak with, to really reflect back to the business, what is it that we're actually driving within our organization. Now, today, online workplace learning has evolved, and a lot of you will know this probably even better than I, but if I can summarize it in three categories, I would say we emerged from a world of open learning. So you provided online learning as an employee benefit that anyone could access at their discretion, and was relatively wide in terms of the topic areas that you could cover. So whether you wanted to learn about something that was directly affected to your job or something outside of it, this learning library that you were given access to were generally a means to keep you engaged and felt that you could own your own learning journey. And typically when you discuss this with the business, it felt as an employee perk, and you looked at what kind of what amount of courses can we offer, and what does that cost per head. And this is how we operated until we thought about, well, actually, whilst we have this vast library of content, and so think a bit like the unstructured internet, we wanted to be a little bit more prescriptive and think about what guided learning can look like. So really helping that learner who perhaps needs that helping hand to understand what is it that could be useful for me to be guided in the right direction, and organizing that content to fit theme, role, and department. And here in a lot of organizations that Sandra and I certainly speak to, still operate in this world where learning hours are key to what they're looking to do, and looking at completion of content as a proxy for success of a learning program. But today, actually, and I encourage you to think about this in the context of your organization, we really try and think about it as a skills-first learning world. And what does that effectively mean? Well, we talked a lot about how the world of skills and workforce is changing. And with that in mind, what are the things that you need in order to meet some of those changes? And what are the critical capabilities that you're looking to build? So with that in mind, actually shifting away from somebody spending 17 hours learning, which does not necessarily prove that they have a skill, not being able to then, unless you're sort of giving them a real life task, being able to actually test whether they have that skill. You only learn that they have spent a lot of time looking into a particular area. And so with this in mind, really what we are looking to focus on is really trying to measure the skills that have been developed, and how quickly, and again here to the pace of change we talked earlier on, and the poll seems to suggest the skills that we need are changing all the time, and we need to get those skills pretty quickly. So really starting to drill into how long is it taking for people to obtain that skill. Now, the way that we do it here at Coursera is, as you saw earlier, we shared some insights from the industry skills report, where we take a holistic look across all of the learners that we have and several other external outputs. And we look at what are the sorts of skills that are in demand across industries and geographies. And we distill this to understand what are some of the in-demand skills, what are the developing and emerging skills of the future. And then we look at the top performing learners and how they're developing with Coursera, and what skills are the result of their spending time on the platform. Now, we've used this intelligence in order to create something called skill sets, which is a role-based learning program. You see some examples here in the middle, and academies, which are a set of functional areas that we most commonly hear about people are looking to develop. I'll give you an example in just a moment, but these role-based learning programs are really there to help you think about what are the key skills that I'm looking to develop within my organization. Now, another
interruption here, Valerie. We have a question from the forum again. The question is, why the top performing learners?
Yes, absolutely. So thank you for the question. So from the perspective of us looking across the learner population, not only is the volume informative, but of course, we also want to understand what is really moving the needle for people actually obtaining something. So in this sense, I spoke earlier about someone spending a lot of time on the platform or thinking about content. But if they're not actually moving the needle, if they're not obtaining knowledge, then certainly that's going to be less informative. So we're less likely to want to make that recommendation for your employees and your workforce. And I'm happy to dive into that question in slightly greater detail, but I'm also very wary of time. So I promise we'll come back to it at the end. Now, in terms of the skills-first learning approach, one of the things that we've seen across the platform resonate time and again is that both learners and those running learning programs really want to be able to demonstrate that they've learned something, really to be able to showcase, not that I've completed courses, that's relevant to me. I want to understand what I have received as an output of spending my time here and be able to demonstrate that internally. Now, I mentioned we use this as a part of a skill set. A skill set for us is that role-based learning program. And here we're thinking about an example whereby you're able to define what are the skills that you want to sit behind someone being able to perform a certain role. And you can, as you see here in the top, drive these levers to showcase, well, if I want someone to really drive innovation within my organization, then this is a key skill that they need to learn. And so these sliders help you define the amount of capability that you want that role to have. And subsequently, this will automatically create a curation for you. And as I mentioned earlier, half of the battle is always finding the right content to really drive that outcome and that skill. And as learners then start to engage with the content, your skill slider will start to accelerate and reflect back to the learner and the business how proficient they are getting. Now, the interaction that they have with the content will come, of course, in various formats. It's designed to be very hands-on and really trying to engage the learner as much as possible to understand and reflect back as to what they're learning. Now, with this in mind, I talked a lot about measuring and outputs, and we see this as a very important component to any learning program. So helping you as an organization visualize your time to skill. So you're discussing with your business the things that you're looking to introduce. You're thinking about, if we're investing this amount in a learning program, what can we expect and over what time frame? Finding it difficult to reflect that back. And actually here at Coursera, this is one of the problems that we've really been trying to tackle and think about. So on the one hand, reflecting to the learner, but certainly also to the organization, how are you faring? So, and how distributed are certain proficiencies within your organization? So for instance, if you're looking to build out a whole new data science capability within your organization, how can we take people from a beginner level all the way to intermediate and advanced? And in what kind of time frame can we expect this? Wonderful.
Quick question, Valerie. There is a question from the forum coming up again. and it is, how does practice-based learning compare to the skills-first learning approach? Could you address that?
Yes, well, actually, let us park this until the end, Aidan. Thank you for your question. I have noted it. But mindful, we do have now a question bit at the end, and I want to make sure that we also get our last poll in, but let's reflect on this, because I think you make a very important point about skills first and practice-based learning. We sort of have alluded a little bit to the answer when I said some of these exercises are very practical. Now, that being said, just to continue on our theme here, as I mentioned, these skills-first learning, skills-based learning programs are designed to address the most in-demand skills that we're seeing in the marketplace today. So whether those are data-related, we heard as from the World Economic Forum, or whether they're those human skills that we underlined are also gaining in importance, we start to think about those. And for those of you, hopefully, who know Coursera a little bit better, what sits behind these skills-based learning programs is our reputation for world-class content and credentials. We source those today, as we have always done, from some of the best universities and industry partners today. Now, Aidan, to your question about hands-on learning and practice-based learning, and whilst this isn't quite in the spirit as I imagine you're intending the question to be, one of the things that was often levied at online learning is that lack of practice and being really able to interact with the content. And so certainly with Coursera, one of the things that we've embarked upon in the last few years is to provide a much more hands-on practical experience. For those of you more familiar with the offering itself, we refer to this as guided projects. And essentially, a guided project allows for you to showcase a set of exercises, and you'll see this here on the slide. It's the one that seems to be dynamically moving, so in case you can see it, it's where an instructor showcases a problem area or a task on the one side of the screen, and you're then following along and performing a set of tasks. And this is an environment in which you're learning in a much shorter format in a way that's highly interactive. Now, that being said, what we see the most successful organizations do is supplement this with programs that they run within their organization. And this is part of the cultural change element that we typically work on with organizations. So we take some of the measurement and actionable insights from their online learning experiences and further supplement that with some of the cultural and change management initiatives that we run with organizations. Now, I mentioned there are a number of academies or key areas that again and again that we're seeing a huge demand for additional resources and learning. And we refer to these as academies. They're essentially off-the-shelf programs that you can run within your organization to achieve certain results. So by way of example, our newest academy is actually the Leadership Academy. I talked a little bit about this previously as part of the human skills that we're seeing an increase in interest of. And with that, when I say a leadership academy, actually what I mean is certainly that this is an opportunity not just for your leaders to learn, but also for your employees to own their self-management journey, which was, again, one of the key areas for growth that we've seen. Now, that said, what does the impact of learning look like typically within an organization? We've worked previously very closely with one of the leading research analyst firms to further analyze what are the sorts of things that you can expect to gain from a partnership such as that with Coursera around learning outcomes. And so here you see some of the key values that we would expect to affect. And I encourage you, as you speak to other learning leaders, to start to think about how can we impact things like retention, how do we measure employee mobility, and how do we measure things like employee brand and so forth, as Coursera works with you in order to drive some of these outcomes. Now, we're looking a little bit forward towards the future now, as I mentioned. So one of the key things that we've been observing is, of course, the changing role and emphasis of the programs that we're seeing. And so to really further underline one of the key topics, and I've spoken about this twice with customers today, so it does feel very present and true, is one of the key areas that we've invested in most recently is that leadership development area. And again, we see this as both a direct result of the pandemic, And so earlier on, you heard that the key output of some of the pandemic has been people feeling more burnt out, feeling that intersection of personal and work life bleeding into one another. And here, leadership is, in the broadest sense, an opportunity for self-leadership and self-management, all the way through, as I mentioned, the opportunity to manage others and projects, as well as leading strategic initiatives, as well as the business. And with that, as I mentioned, we have developed, and this is very hot off the press, it's very recent, so please, I do encourage you to look into this further. We developed this leadership academy, and speaking to that, leading transformation obviously is the key theme that we're seeing all through our presentation today. But from everything that we've heard, it also is there to drive some of those topics like growth mindset and storytelling and some of those interpersonal skills that we've heard about today. Now, as a quick summation of today, I hope you get an opportunity to get to know Coursera a little bit more as time goes on. Please download the industry skills report and immerse yourself in some of the findings from that. But those of you who don't know us, we're today the world's largest learning platform with over 82 million learners. And we have an ecosystem that is comprised not only of the educators that develop the content for us, but also those institutions that provide the job opportunities and employment opportunities, both businesses, governments, as well as those educational organizations. And they inform that ecosystem that you will work with in conjunction with Coursera. Now, more than lots of organizations will choose Coursera, but in the interest of time, I just want to get to the last poll today. So I thank you all for your patience, and one last chance to vote. What are the topics you would like Coursera to address in the future? So some of you have perhaps met us for the first time, so I really encourage you to take a look, as I mentioned, at the industry skills report. Feel free to reach out to both Sandra and myself, and most importantly, also please join us for the OEB event in Germany in December. But that said, what are the future topics you would be most interested to explore more with Coursera? A, ROI from learning programs. B, culture of learning. C, addressing the skills gap. D, diversity in the workplace. And E, other. So I wonder which one is going to win today. Sandra,
Well, it looks quite like it will be the culture of learning. That is one of the hot topics to be addressed. And for us, a really good one, I think, because we embrace this with many customers already. But obviously, I think always the addressing of the skills gap is an important one. And we have been doing this with the new and latest things we have been bringing on the market, especially with the Leadership Academy and with our Skillsfirst learning approach. So what do we see? We see, well, I think B is the winner so far from those who have been participating.
Yeah, it's wonderful. So I wanted to take an opportunity to thank you. I think Sandra wants to tell us just a quick highlight of the OEB event. And thank you all for taking the time and your patience, and we hope to see you there.
Thank you so much, Valerie. And thank you to all of you for your time and attention today. It has been really great to have you here, hear your thoughts and see your views in the poll. I hope we could give you a good idea and help you with these questions about building a future-proof workforce. Because I will also participate again in the next big OEB event from the 1st to the 3rd of December in Berlin, called Shaping the Future of Learning. And we look very much forward to seeing you again in a couple of months. Wish you all the best, take good care, and see you soon. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to Valerie and myself on LinkedIn. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure. Bye-bye.